So enlightenment may be uncommon, but it's not special. It's not special because when we recognize what we truly and essentially are, we can soon see that same beingness as that aliveness in everyone, as their essence also. This is what the Buddha meant when he was awakened and was reported to have said, "I and all beings have simultaneously awakened." Right? This was the meaning of that. When we recognize our own true nature, we can see it everywhere. Everywhere, in all other persons, in all other sentient beings, in the earth, everything, as awakeness. So when that's recognized, there's also recognition that it may feel really good, but it's not special. It doesn't elevate us in any way above others. In fact, the contrary would be more true, because there's, together with that elation of having discovered what we may have long searched for, there's also a sadness. And the sadness is around all the unnecessary suffering, all the suffering that's a consequence of not recognizing who we truly are. Deep compassion. So what we wake up to is not a better version of this me as a separate self. What we wake up to is the recognition that there never was a self. It's not, we don't get to be a better self. We find out that there never was a self. It's not like we really let go of ego, let go of this idea of separate personhood. It's that we find out that it just was never true. The idea of it can be frightening, terrifying perhaps, but it's just a thought. It's not actually a physical entity that we're giving up. You know, the body clearly exists. Mental activities clearly exist. The only question is that truly what we essentially are? And that's the whole spiritual journey, to find out the answer to that question. But what we wake up from is the identity with our thoughts and beliefs. You know, so if we wake up from that identity, the idea of holding ourselves to be special raises a question of who, right? Who is that's holding myself out to be special as a result of awakening? And hopefully that can be seen quickly, because there's a vulnerable period after awakening where the ego is a bit frantic. Actually, it's trying to sort of pull us back into its domain. You know, not that there is an actual ego identity, but it's just a pattern of thoughts, right? And those thoughts that have been with us for a long time have a certain stickiness to them. And one of the thoughts that's particularly alluring after awakening, immediately after awakening, maybe even, for some period of time after awakening, is the thought, well, this is special. This feels good. It must be special, and all those other people are still striving to find this out. Right? So that a thought like that is just sticky, right? It has some energy behind it, and it's alluring. But if we give it just a little bit of toehold, there's another whole host of ideas right behind it that can pull us back into ego land, right? So this any thought that's sort of self-aggrandizing, from awakening, needs to be immediately suspect. And again, not that we have to make those thoughts stop, right? We don't have that power. They may arise, right? Our job is to see that they're not true. Just the thought may arise, but if we're not disturbed by the presence of the thought, or enjoy the idea of the thought, either way works. Either way gives it energy, right? So, but if we just see it as just a thought passing through, no significance, not true, it'll wither on its own. May still come back from time to time, but that energy will just diminish fairly quickly over time if we don't engage with it either for or against. Right? So the idea of being our job is really to remain vigilant, not hyper vigilant, not so vigilant that we seek out problems that we don't really have, but just being attentive to the body, to remain aware of when if there's a sense of pride coming through the body, just be aware of that. Again, feelings can be generated from thoughts. If there's a prideful thought and the body sort of moves with that a bit, again, our job isn't to try to make it go away, sort of oppose it. Any opposition will give it energy. It's just to acknowledge it. And what we're acknowledging it from is the awareness of that thought, that feeling. That's our job. That's our whole job. And to remain grounded in awareness, and not be pulled around like a dog on a leash by our conditioned thoughts. So Ramana had an interesting take on this, because there are a lot of people that claim that after enlightenment, that conditioning should just disappear. Thoughts, shouldn't be happening. But Ramana said something to the contrary. He said even for him, conditioned thoughts still arose. The difference was that he could see them and just didn't act on them, didn't choose to act on them. Right? So again, the job is not to try to make those thoughts stop, but just to notice them, to see them for what they are. Okay, so this whole sense of specialness is something that can come to mind, because awakening feels good. I mean, it feels really good. And so, we can get caught up in that, and there can be this sense of specialness, especially, considering that we may have been striving for that for many years, and, in some ways striving in, regular worldly life or spiritual life up to a certain point may have some benefits, right? Pays off, and then there can be a certain pride, even in our spiritual community, a certain pride about, what spiritual experiences we may have had, or what teachers we may have studied with, or foreign lands that we traveled in, or how many years we've been at it, or how long we can sit and meditate, or whatever. But it's, again, we can, at some point, all of that sense of striving to improve this, our sense of self, can be seen for what it is, right? So I had the experience one time. I don't think Patty's even heard this story before, but I had this experience once. This was in the late 70s. I was in this encounter group for, I think it was 3 days, full straight days, never leaving the group for 3 days. And the assignment, the instructor caught on that I was harboring this sense of specialness. And so my task for a whole day, like 8 hours, 8 straight hours, was to go out to the entrance of the facility with a sign hung around my neck that said, I think I'm special, ask me why. And people would be filing in and out, and I don't know, maybe a dozen people that day would sit down next to me and ask me to tell them why I was special, felt special, right? And about, I don't know, you do that enough times, and even to yourself, it just sounds trite. I mean, at that age, I was probably in early 30s at the time. At that age, I thought I'd done a few things, and so at first I could sort of earnestly say why I thought I was special. By the end of the day, I just couldn't even do that. I mean, it was just so it just was so meaningless, and I could see how limited it was, and how false it was, really. So that sort of took a lot of the wind out of that sail. So in the West, Western religions have this idea of perfection, right, and sort of a range. And so we have humans, and then we have saints, and then we have maybe angels, and then we have God, right? And there's a degree of perfection as you move upward. It's interesting in most Eastern religions that they take humans to be the level at which liberation is most easily attained. And the idea of being, more godlike carries with it the potential for fall, to come down to reality, to come down to just what we are. Also in Western religion, many Western religions, there's a sense of there being one God, and you're not it. Right? So there's this sense of otherness. There's a sense of higher than, and associated with that is this belief that's really prevalent in this country, whether you belong to a particular religion or not, but it's sort of culturally ingrained, and that is that somehow we're less worthy from the get-go, somehow flawed, sinful, however you want to phrase it. And the best that we can do is somehow be devoted to something that is out of reach, essentially, right? So much beyond us that we couldn't hopefully attain, right? Beyond us as mere humans. So from that cultural perspective, if to Western ears, to hear someone like Nisargadatta whose book was entitled I Am That, sounds like just heresy, right? I mean, it sounds like here's someone that is claiming to be God. And to Western ears, that just sounds heretical. But it's not what he meant it at all. When there's an equivalent phrase, when you say it in Sanskrit, it sounds better. But the Sanskrit phrase, which is the ancient spiritual language of India, is tattvam asi, which means that thou art. Essentially the same thing, but the emphasis is a little different. Right? And it sounds more palatable to Western ears because it doesn't sound like an individual person is claiming godlike status. It also has the word thou in it, which is, clearly religious, so carries a little bit more weight. But this sense of not being separate from is one significant difference between Eastern religions. I'm speaking generally of here, of course, and Western religions. There's that sense in the East of this all being one unfolding of life, rather than a hierarchical thing where there was a God that created the world and then steps back from it and judges our performance in it. So when Western explorers first went east, they encountered Buddhism, and they claimed they went back to England, which was big into exploring back then, and reported that Buddhism wasn't a religion. And it wasn't a religion because they didn't believe in God. But what the Buddhists had a lot of respect for was this awareness. And when we really look at what awareness is, we can see that it doesn't have a point of origin, doesn't have a size, it doesn't have an age, doesn't have a gender, doesn't have a shape, doesn't have a lifespan. It just doesn't have those attributes. So without those attributes, where's the limit? Where's the edge of it? What's the size of it? What's the duration of it? And without those attributes, what we can say is that it's not limited because its capacity is to notice everything. Everything that we've ever experienced, everything that we've ever done has only happened within awareness. You have no experience, no memory of anything that happened outside awareness. So the sense of awareness being not limited or unlimited, or another way to say that is infinite, right? Not finite. But it does have this capacity to know whatever is happening. And every perception, every thought, every feeling. That's what it can do. So everything that appears within that field of awareness has a certain quality. Whether we're talking about a chair, we say a chair exists. We say the walls in your room exist. You could say your feet exist. You could say this thought exists. This feeling exists. Everything that has a form has this quality of existence. And we have a sense of what that is, right? That existence may come and go, as all forms do, right? But whether it's what we would call a solid object like a table or a chair, or whether it's a more an object that we sense, like a thought or a feeling, they're still objects, they're still forms, but they have this quality of existence. So the term exist is interesting. It comes from the Latin, and it means to stand out from. And in a sense, all of these objects that we're talking about, whether external objects or internal objects, have this quality that they stand out from what we essentially are, which is this capacity to know, this capacity to be aware. So we all have a good sense of what that means to exist. Something exists, that we can look at it. But what's looking at it is not what is being looked at, right? It's something prior to that. So this awareness, since it is outside of the world of form, it doesn't have the attributes of form, right? It doesn't have a size or a shape or a duration, doesn't have a lifespan that we can find. So in that sense, the way we're using the word exist, we could say that awareness doesn't exist. It doesn't stand out from whatever it is that we are. We can't stand back from awareness and look at it because it's what's looking. Right? So this is what the Zen people mean by unborn, undying, that the awareness is what is present for the entirety of our existence, including birth, life, and death, without apparent beginning or end. Any assumption that there is a beginning or an end is just an assumption, because we couldn't experience anything except within awareness, right? So as far back as we can remember, anything that we can remember has happened and can only happen within that awareness. So here we have things, objects, forms, and we have awareness within which all of that is happening. And that awareness, as we talked about a few minutes ago, has this sense of the infinite, no limit, and everything that we can ever experience happens within that. So isn't that the same as the entirety of our known world, our awareness, and that which appears within it. If it's the entirety of our experience, is that not whole? Is that not the wholeness? Is that not the unity that spiritual people talk about? It's not that we have to gain unity. It's that we have to recognize what's already happening. That sense of wholeness, that sense of everything happens within that which I am, which is this awareness, right? Is that not true for everyone already? So if we can relax back into that sense of just awareness, and reconsider this statement, the Sanskrit statement, that thou art, right? That, just a pointing, right? A pointing to the whole nature, that you are already. No qualifications, no fine print. It's what we all are already. So when that's recognized, it's really not a. It can be a joyous occasion, but there is not that sense of specialness. And if there is, it's dangerous, right? If there's if the idea of enlightenment before enlightenment happens, there can be this idea of, well, that would be extremely cool, and I would certainly be special when that happens. That's just false. But the same belief after awakening is both delusional and dangerous. And there have been more than a few people that have realized something significant and then gotten terribly lost, just for this very reason. I once asked to have the opportunity in a small group in Costa Rica to ask Eckhart Tolle what made some teachers go off the deep end, and he said because they feel special. So that's just what we're talking about. So there is can be a certain tension after awakening between this sense of knowing this awareness, knowing in the sense of being acquainted with it. It's not like we know it like a fact. There can be that sense of being familiar with the awareness, and knowing up here in our head that is what I essentially am. But there can also be the sense in the body as it's sort of a yeah, but sense, like the body's saying, I'm not so sure about that, I have my doubts. And there can be this tension between the two. And, some people try to resolve that tension quickly by trying to make a mental decision about which is true. Is it me as this body mind having the experience of awareness theoretically generated by my brain? That's option A. Option B is awareness is my fundamental identity, living this life through and as this human form. So that's, one of the most, fundamental questions in spirituality. One implies this personal, separate awareness, and the other implies an impersonal awareness. Impersonal doesn't mean dismissive of this particular body-mind. It just means not only associated with this particular body-mind. Not personal. Impersonal in that sense, not personal. Applicable to all. So if we believe that this awareness within which everything happens is my personal attribute, we can see how that can easily lead to a sense of specialness. If I realize that, then what I'm really saying is that this body-mind has awakened, right? Since this body-mind is a form, then it's easy to make that next step to, therefore, this body-mind is what's special. Right? This body-mind is what's awake. No. The body-mind comes along for the ride, gradually gets on board with what's known at a deeper level. And what can be known at a deeper level is that this awareness is not personal. It's not a possession of this body-mind. Even though that's what we've been taught, that's what it feels like. But there is this sense of deep intimacy, that it's still as closer than my own tongue, right? Closer than can be. There's that sense, but there's also the sense of it's not my possession, something that I am. It's not something that I possess. So the difference from the point of awareness is that we can see these highly conditioned movements on a personal level to try to grab onto ideas about ourselves. And almost as if, each individual person believes that they're in their own little awareness bubble, like in their own reality. If awareness is fundamental and we believe that it's generated from this body-mind, then in a sense, we are living in our own reality. And in fact, that's what most people seem like they're doing. They seem to be living in their own world. Open the door, please. So one of the consequences of believing that this awareness is personal is that it's easy to fall into ideas of separation and otherness. Right? When there's a sense of, I can recognize the awareness here, and I can recognize it as being that which is essence of everyone. Where's the other? Where's the separation? When we can truly recognize that what we are as that impersonal awareness is what is most fundamental for everybody. That's really the underlying unity, right? That's actually where we are all not only equal, but not separated at all. Not like two separate things have to figure out how to come together. There's just a recognition that one awareness is what we all are, is what everything is. But this sense of separation and otherness has consequences, right? It's actually what nations do when they want to go to war. One of the first things they do is sort of dehumanize the opponent, give them derogatory nicknames, slurs, and then it's easier to hate the opponent. It's easier to convince people to kill the opponent. And we don't need wars to do that. We can do it in politics. We can do it within religions. We can do it within race. We can do it within gender. We can do it within sexual preferences. There's lots of ways that same game plays out. Dehumanize the opponent and then feel entitled somehow to mistreat, harm, hurt, lynch, kill, mistreat, take, judge. So this sense of not being whole, not being in alignment with the oneness, the underlying oneness of all beings, has consequences. And the popularity of beliefs in separation, division, and otherness, we can see those results play out in the world to great suffering, right? Immense suffering, all founded on beliefs. Because we tend to act, we do act in accordance with what we believe, right? And how those beliefs play out in the world can have great harm to other people when we feel separate, when we feel just, in our own space, our own being, everybody's out there trying to grab all the gusto they can. But if there's truly that recognition, that the awareness that we are able to see in ourselves as who we truly are, is also functioning in and as everybody, who are we opposing? Who are we willing to harm? Who are we willing to denigrate? So that awareness, when we really come in touch with the implications of what has been realized as that being our deepest nature, there's this sense of openness. There's a sense of receptivity, not because it's the spiritual thing to do or the right thing to do, or I'll get some benefit from doing it, or people will like me better. None of that. It's just that this awareness, that's what it is. That's it can't help it. It's just open. What blocks that sense is our thoughts and beliefs and fears and opinions, and doubts and self-judgments. All of that is what blocks that flow. The heart, the heart itself is already open, except to the degree that it's constrained by our concepts, believed concepts. But when there's that commonality, that understanding that awareness is the nature of existence. It is how existence is experienced by everybody, whether they know it or not already. Then it doesn't feel like we're walking around in a foreign land. It doesn't feel like we're surrounded by enemies. We still will have preferences. We still may like some things better than others. But those likes and dislikes aren't, they're just, a result of our conditioning. But they're not, we can see that as not being essentially who we are. And we can see that, what happens in the world is a result of, all of the causes, all of the conditions that went before that resulted in a particular situation or particular behavior, particular outcome, all contributed to that. Endless streams flowing into this one circumstance. Right? So even the idea of sitting back and judging and saying that is wrong, that shouldn't have happened. I mean, it's really elevating ourselves to the, degree of specialness that we're essentially considering ourselves in a godlike position to know what all of these circumstances and conditions that led to this one event shouldn't have happened. I mean, can we really know that? I mean, what we can know is that this event, whatever it was, did happen. That we can know. But to go that extra layer of certainty to say, well, that's right or that's wrong, who are we to judge? Who made us that special? What we can say with certainty is that it did happen. I know it's not very special to say that, because we could say that about everything. So it's easy to misunderstand this point. It doesn't mean that, therefore, we just let everything go. Don't do anything. Don't act. Don't take any responsibility. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means to refrain from that, putting ourselves in a position of believing that we know what's right or wrong, what's good or bad, and just being present for the situation with as much presence and awareness as we can muster, and look at it objectively from the larger perspective, not from this personal what's best for me perspective. That we can do, and we can do that much more effectively if we're not hobbled by doubts and questions about right or wrong, good or bad, should I do this or shouldn't I? It's just seeing what's most appropriate for the situation and having the courage to act on it. And this, what gives that movement aliveness is that it's not coming from an agenda. It's not coming from old patterns. It's not coming from a certain belief. Situation A means reaction B. It's not that at all. It means being present for, available for, open for whatever the circumstances, and trusting one's deepest intuition, you could say. Not knowing what that will be. That's actually the part that keeps it alive. Because every situation will be different. Yes, no two situations will be identical. So if we're coming to a certain situation from a formulaic standpoint, it'll always be off. It'll feel a little stale. So the sense, if the more we can just rest in this awareness and recognize that everything is happening within that awareness, there's an availability there because that awareness is itself receptive always, right? It's not being guarded. It's not being judgmental. It's not saying this is right, this is wrong. It's just aware, open. I mean, there will of course be situations that we don't like. There could be situations where physical harm is possible, and then we will have the wherewithal to do what needs to be done. Remove ourselves from the situation, whatever. We don't know how that response will be, but I guarantee if it's coming from the clarity of awareness rather than out of fear, out of judgment, out of preconceived ideas, out of opinions, it will be much truer, much more in alignment with our deepest sense of self. And that openness is unconditional. It's really love is really the refusal to turn away from whatever's happening. We may like it, we may not like it. So it's by being open and available doesn't mean that we're striving for perfection in our feelings. Those will all be still a function of our conditioned being. So we might like certain situations or certain people, might not care for other people or other situations. The idea isn't to like everybody. It's not going to happen. But what we can do is, if in the presence of someone, we can still be open, we can still acknowledge, we can still be present for, we can still listen, and we might choose not to, right? But what we don't need to do is fight with those likes and dislikes. We can just see them for what they are. But the actions, if they come out of the conditioned thoughts, will be conditioned behavior. If they come out of awareness, if we can retain that presence of awareness, even when contraction may be happening, we can be aware of that contraction and act accordingly. Be a little more careful, maybe. We don't have to make the contraction disappear. We don't have to fight with it, but we can be aware of it. That awareness makes all the difference. And that open-hearted awareness actually is unconditional. That's how it is. And that unconditional receptivity is how awareness moves in the world. And what it's felt like by others is it's felt like unconditional love.